Right. And you think his comment back? I mean, we make a huge theological, we develop a whole theology, right, based on these statements. And yet, a lot of it, the Greeks would look at it and would say, well, this is entertaining, but not just entertaining. They would see it as a logical argument, a fermentation of a logical argument, right? But what we do is we pull it out of context and go, oh, what good can come out of Nazareth? Well, remember, we do a rabbinic context, and if we look in the Septuagint and see what it says within the context, we might get the full form of what they're talking about. But what do? We just take it out of context, right? Why not? It's just a statement. I mean, it's like we're Gnostics or something. I'm going to probably talk to a group about the canon, and you know, the one question people always ask today is, well, why isn't the Gospel of Thomas, for example, included in the Gospels? Gospel of Thomas is probably 1st century. Never found with the other Gospels because it's a Gnostic work and it's a sayings work. And if you read it, you wouldn't gain anything new about it. You know, it was rejected by the early because they weren't sure of the source. But anyway, I have some really interesting words of the day. I think Hebrews is amazingly interesting. The vocabulary in it is very different than the rest of all the works we have. This is Entuggenein. I don't know if I can pronounce this correctly. And the word is intuchano. It's got that thing, the dashing sound. This is a very interesting word because look what it's translated as. It's translated in the King James as to deal with or make intercession. I don't remember what exactly it says in the NIV. But this word, okay, we know this. This is the prefix en. And the prefix en in general means in English. It can also mean, if you look at that, it says it is a primary preposition. It denotes a fixed in place, time, or state, a relation in rest, as in or at or up or on, by, etc. That's not the interesting word. The interesting word is this one right here, which is tukano, or tukano, tucho. This word means to bring to pass, literally the idea of affecting or to affect, but it means specifically to hit or light upon as a mark to be reached. This means to hit the target. In Greek, to hit a mark. They didn't have a target like we have a target, right? Targets have yet to be invented. They didn't call it a target. They called it hitting a mark. Because what you cared about in warfare was not hitting a... What did you want to hit when you were in warfare?
The enemy.
The enemy, a guy, right? So in the beginning, the point was to hit a mark because you wanted to hit the enemy. We invented the concept of the target because archery started as like when you wanted to kill animals, right? Or to kill people in warfare, you want to hit the mark, hit the point. We invented the idea of the target because we turned it, well, the Greeks did, right? Into a game. Yeah. So now you want to hit a target. They call it a mark. This is a word that means to hit the mark, the target or the mark. What is the word that we are familiar with? Harmantia, right? What does harmantia mean? To miss the mark. Harmantia is usually translated in English to be sin. Wow. I mean, this is really kind of interesting. This is the exact opposite in a Greek thought to sin. In other words, you're making the mark. I think this is a really important concept, because to us sin is, however you want to look at it, what have we made sin? What's that?
Falling short of the holiness of God.
Yeah, but you know what? It's permanent, because of the way we look at it, which I'm not sure that's the way we talk about original sin, right? Original sin means
Everyone has it.
yes, it means everyone has missed the mark. You don't even get a chance. I don't even get a chance to make the mark, right? Because if I have original sin, there's no hope. And I'm not going to say something against original sin. I'm just saying it's very interesting. This is our philosophy. But yet the Greek philosophy is I'm actually trying to achieve something and I miss it. That's sin. That is a completely different view of our world, right? Our world is I have to go out and work to sin. You do, right? I mean, if I'm going to do something bad, I got to figure, okay, where am I going to go? Okay, I'm going to go down to the tavern, right? And I have to choose. I have to get my car. I have to make a choice. I have to go make a choice to get in the tavern. I have to make a choice to drink. And then I have to make a choice to pick up somebody I'm not supposed to be picking up. Or I have to do something that's wrong, right? Or make a decision. What?
Premeditated almost, it sounds like.
Yes, sir.
Speaking of sin, I want to go back to something we talked about last week. You had mentioned that there were like 36 sins that were unforgivable to Jews.
Yes.
All right. When Christ came, those are now forgivable.
That's what we teach, yes.
Correct.
And Paul.
You would think back then that anybody who done one of those 36 would be flocking to Christ and to Tehotos, because now they have a chance.
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to understand that.
Well, that is why okay, what do we read in Acts? What does it say in Acts verbatim?
The priests came to know.
Many priests, and it also says many of the Israelites, many of the people, the Jewish people came to Christ. The message that Paul was teaching resonated with the diaspora, because the people in the diaspora, guess what?
They couldn't keep it going.
They couldn't keep, there's a bunch of the 36 they couldn't keep. There's about 12 of the 36 that they could not keep because they were away from Israel. So what do you think they were thinking? Thank God, right? I want you to see this, because this is going to become very important in Hebrews, and it is translated to deal with or make intercession. But this means the opposite of sin. In other words, it means to hit the mark, to hit the mark. And the translation that Strong's gives is, it's a very complex word, okay? Specifically, he translates it as, let's see, where is that? To attain or secure an object, transitive, to attain or secure an object, or intransitive, to happen. Impersonal, perchance, present participle, as an adjective, usual, as an adverb, by accident. To chance upon, specifically this means to chance upon, to confer with, or to entreat. So Greek, but the Greek, when you dig into it, it means to hit the mark. This word right here, P-A-N-T-E-L-E-S, Panteles, Panteles, I think is the way it's pronounced. Yeah, basically all. This comes from pas. Pas means all or everything. Pandemic, pandemonium, Telos. Telos. We know that a telos is to set out for a definite point or goal. The point aimed at as a limit. All right, does anybody see how these two words are connected to one another? This is all telos. All telos is translated specifically to mean we have translated in no wise or uttermost, but the word means all telos, all full-ended, the entire, an entire completion. Boy, very complex words. This is the mark. A pantelos is the ultimate mark, or the completion mark, right? And in tukane means to hit it. Yeah, to hit it. All right, let's see how this fits within the context of Hebrews. We're on Hebrews 25. If you remember, okay, we're still talking about that Melchizedek guy, and I'll remind you, okay, the answer to this question, the answer to the Hebrews is trying to answer for you, and this should be pertinent to you. I'm not born a Jew. Does this stuff matter to me? I'm not a Jew. Does this matter to me? I was thinking about Samuel. Samuel's, okay, I may be giving you a precursor, but Samuel is one of the main Old Testament lessons, right? And God called Samuel. The Hebrew writer didn't use Samuel. Did you know some interesting things about Samuel? What family did Samuel come from? What tribe? Was it the tribe of Levi? Was he from the lineage of Aaron? Eli was the lineage of Aaron, right? What happened to his sons? They were in the direct lineage. And Eli croaked. Well, how did the lineage of Aaron get passed on? Was Samuel a priest? Could he be a priest?
Prophet.
He was a prophet. Samuel would have kind of fit, you know, if our Hebrew writer was going to talk to us about the Jews, like Hebrews, right? Who would you pick? Jesus was a priest in the lineage of... Yeah, but if you were talking to Jews, he would be a priest in the lineage of Samuel. But Samuel wasn't a priest. We don't know if he did priestly stuff, but he was trained as a priest. He was a prophet. Our assumption is he did act as a priest. And you remember, look, okay, I'm not going to, look, don't play the games, right? We have to answer the question straight out. Was the lineage of Aaron straight through? Probably not. We know the lineage of the kings weren't, right? You know that, right? You cannot trace the lineage of the kings. Who was Ahab's wife? Jezebel. Was Jezebel a Jew? So therefore all the children of Ahab were not Jewish. This is why in the New Testament we get two lineages for Christ. One through Mary and one through Joseph. The one through Mary is in Luke. The one through Joseph is in Matthew. The reason is because the one through Matthew is through the kings. The one for Mary is through the queens. And both of them show the lineage. However, Jesus would not be a Jew if he went through the kings, because there were mothers in the kings of the lineage of the kings of Israel who were not Jewish women. This is a big deal. You know, to us it's not a big deal. We don't care, right? It's a big deal to these folks, especially the Jewish people. Because remember, what was the big deal coming back from the diaspora? You know it. What did they do to them?
Examined their papers. They could not work on the temple. They were considered un-Jews or Samaritans.
Yeah, and they became either Samaritans. They may have become Samaritans, or they might have said, forget this, I'm going back to Babylon, right?
A lot of them did stay in Babylon.
This is a big deal. This is huge. To us, it's nothing, right? Because we're 2,000 years removed. But this is a huge deal to the people of the time. If you remember, King Herod destroyed the records in the temple on purpose, because he was an Edomite, And he wanted to prove the lineage, or make his lineage the lineage of the kings of Israel. And remember, the Maccabees, they were the Maccabees from the tribe of Judah. Maccabees were from the tribe of Levi. And yet his sons were not Aaronite children, but they became high priests, and they also became king, which was totally illegal, right? Okay, it gets deeper. It gets even deeper than this. 25, this is what it says in the NIV. Therefore, he is able to save completely those who come to God through him, because he always lives to intercede for them. Let's see what it says. 25, wherefore, literally this is from which cause? Hotin. From which cause? Dynamite, basically to be able, kai. And, it's kai, it's not really also, it's and. To save, suzo. Them is added, ice, to. Thee, there is a thee in here. I give you the these. When you ever see ho in Greek can mean the direct article, the. It does not ever mean a. It can't mean a. It means, because a is implied direct article in Greek. So it can mean the, it can mean who, it can mean which, it can mean that, they, whatever. But whenever I put it in there, I want you to see that, whether the these exist or not. A lot of these get added in because English is one of the few languages. English is the language of articles. We have a's and these, right? In all the forms. And so mostly Western languages have articles. To us, it's very important that there is a or the, right? An a thing or the thing. So most cultures, most languages don't do that. Uttermost, pantelis. Pantelis. Uttermost is in pantelis. All aim point of the limit. All aim point of the limit. That, and there's a ho, that proskeromai, come forward to, unto is ho, the God, theos. By or dia. Dia means through. We put a lot of bys in there, but through him, altos, altos is correct, him. Seeing is added. He pantote, all wins. Pantote, all wins. Pantote, all wins. All wins. Interesting word. Pantote. Liveth, literally to live, that's correct. To make intercession. It's not make intercession. It's in tuchan ein. Un tuchano. To light upon a mark to be reached. For, literally not for, it's hooper, it's over them. Here's the translation. But which cause is able also to save to all aim point of the limit that come forward to the God through him, all wins, lives to into light upon the mark to be reached over them. All right, I know this sounds kind of complicated, but the point is this. Let's break it down. From which cause is able, that is Jesus, from which cause is able to save all aim point of the limit. Okay, the impression here is that what does everyone want to do? Everyone wants to hit the mark. This is much different than the idea of we have in our culture of sin, right? In sin, we don't do something. In the worldview of the Hebrews, the authors are saying, and I think this is absolutely correct, don't you want to succeed? Right? You do, don't you? You want to succeed in life. You want to succeed in all that you do. You want to succeed with your child rearing, with your home, with your wealth. Right? You want to succeed. Everyone is aiming for the mark. You want to achieve the mark. Goes on to say, to save all the limit, all the aim point of the limit, come forward to the God through him. Through him, all wins, lives to light upon the mark to be reached over them. In other words, the purpose that Jesus came, the purpose for Jesus is so what?
He can hit the mark for us.
No. So that he can enable us to hit the mark. Yes, sir.
I was just thinking of Jesus' last word on the cross, tetelestai, which means it's related to your pantelis. Very similar word to reach the telos. It all hits now. It's complete.
Telestai is the word you're talking about, and telestai is a wonderful word. Usually we translate this word, it is finished. In Greek, it meant, yeah, paid in full. Paid in full is pretty good. But what does it really mean in Greek?
Wasn't it, isn't it what they used to
Tell
stamp
us.
on the bill?
She said it. I have hit the mark. This means I have hit the mark. So when Jesus was on the cross, he said, I have hit the mark. Don't you want to hit the mark? The author of Hebrews is telling us that Jesus as a high priest allows us to hit the mark. It doesn't say he hits the mark for us. It says he allows us to hit the mark. So in other words, here's in other words, because Jesus is a high priest of the age, he is able to save all who aim at the limit, who come forward through him to God, because all existence lives to reach the aim point held over them. God is holding an aim point over us. The aim point is we want to reach that mark, right? There's a contest of life. We know from the Old Testament the 36 things we can't do, right? We can't reach the mark. We can't do it. So how are we going to reach the mark? This is the answer to the age. This is the beautiful answer. This is the reason that in this period of time where people just, kind of coming into the Kyrios, into the ecclesias, where they just, a little bit? Was it a trickle? What was it? Hundreds, thousands of people were coming to Teen Hodos because they wanted, if we got away from the idea of a sin problem, there is a sin problem. Don't get me wrong. They know there's a sin problem, but the sin problem to the Greeks wasn't necessarily the sin. It was everything, right? It's not just sin. You don't say, hey, Jesus, just get rid of all my sin, right? What do you say? I want to feel good. I want to achieve. I want to be. Don't you? Right? Yes, sir.
Is there a different mark for every person, or is there only one mark? Because when you bring in all these secular things that you're asking us to think about,
Yeah.
a success for you may not be the same success for someone else. And we all strive for success, but our successes are different. And I'm asking you the question when you're talking, what is the author saying? Is there one mark, or does each one of us have our own mark?
There is always the assumption in all this literature that the Torah is the mark. The Torah is it. And Jesus himself said that.
Well, I think the parable of the talent,
Yeah.
the 5, the 2, the 1, I mean, in my understanding, what Christ is saying in his parable is that the one that he gave 5 to has a different mark than the one he gave 2 to, that he only gave 1 to. And it is our responsibility in our lifetime to reach our mark.
I don't disagree with that, but what you're talking about is, I think, the Old Testament view versus the New Testament view. The Old Testament view gave us a minimum bar. The Old Testament view is a minimum bar. So if you said, what is the bar? What is the, in a Hebrew viewpoint, right, a Jewish viewpoint, what's the bar? They would say, it's the Torah. And I think Jesus would say the same thing if you talk to him. Jesus right here, he told us in Matthew, the Torah, not a jot or a tittle would be lost. But then the New Testament, I think the message of Christ isn't about meeting the minimum. The message of Christ is about meeting the what? Hitting the mark, right? And what you said is exactly right. The New Testament very clearly expresses to us, like your mark might be 10 talents, right? And your mark may be 5 talents, and mine may be 2 talents. See? But what Jesus is calling us to is, I gave you these gifts, you reach the mark. Where the Torah would say, if you meet these minimums, you met the mark. But see, to answer other cultures or other people or other, you know, the slippery slope of the, what do you call it, the sliding, what do we call this, conditional ethics, right? Situational ethics. The answer is always the Torah. The Torah is the minimum, and that you can reach the mark through Christ. Yes, sir.
Is not the ultimate mark heaven on earth? That's the Lord's Prayer. Do your will in heaven on earth.
I think that that's not true at all. I think Jesus said very clearly, right, what was the message of Jesus through all of Mark? Like, no, it's here. It's not that it's coming. His message through all of Mark is the kingdom of heaven is here. It's coming together. And in the age of the Messiah, what was true? The kingdom of heaven, the mark of the age of the Messiah was that the kingdom of heaven was here. We are living in the kingdom of heaven. Why? We have access to God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit, all in one. We have access to salvation, which we didn't have in the previous era, in the previous aeon, as the Greeks would say. Yeah, this is kind of a deep thing, isn't it? It's a different, I don't think it's, look, I think that all of our I know the fact that the Greeks thought this way. What happened to us? I think culturally, we started thinking, we're Anglo-Saxons, right? Our background is mostly Anglo-Saxons or Germanic, right? And so our thoughts and thinking come from a different cultural background. And when we translated the words, which I think is a real, I'm glad we have translations in our hand, but I think part of a problem with our translations is before we had translations, we hopefully had good priests or pastors or leaders or teachers who knew it right, who understood it.
Greek and Latin.
And, by the way, who else got taught Greek and Latin?
Scholars, anybody.
No, you did. If you went to school anywhere before the turn of the last century, even the turn of the last century, up to about 50 years, about 1950, what would you learn?
Greek and Latin.
Greek and Latin.
Didn't need a translation.
Greek and Latin. You learned Greek and Latin. You knew it, right? But we don't teach it no more. Why not? Well, I think
Martin Luther wanted it in our language.
we're trying. I think we should try. You know, the problem with Latin, though, part of the problem with Latin, if you learn Latin, unfortunately, all you have access to is the Vulgate, right? That's a translation in Latin, which also causes some of our problems, right? Matter of fact, I've had a lot of Christians, a lot of people ask me, well, what do the words of the Nicene Creed mean? Because it's kind of wackadoodle, a little bit, right? A little wacky, right? You know why it's a little wacky? It's a Latin translation. It may have been formulated in Greek. We don't know. The Apostolic Creed was obviously probably formulated in Greek and then translated to Latin, but then translated to English, right? Nicene Creed, we don't know. It probably came out of Latin, maybe directly. And it's scriptural. But, you know, when we translate it, we get a little bit of funniness in there, right? That's why going back to the original language, I think, is really critical for us. I think this is an incredible message of hope. In 25, especially in a correct translation, because it promises us this hope. The hope is that salvation for us equals hitting the mark. It means that Jesus is not just helping you meet the mark, but because of Jesus, you can hit the mark. Now, I'm not gonna say this is health and welfare gospel. You know what I'm talking about? You know what the health and welfare gospel is, right? Yeah, if I believe hard enough, oh, it's not belief, is it? It's what? It's if I am convinced. If I'm convinced, what am I going to use? I'm going to use my suke. I think it's really phenomenal that the words, remember the words in Matthew? You guys remember Matthew? Way back when we studied Matthew and we studied Mark, and the words that were used consistently in Matthew and Mark, and especially when Christ was talking about the Sermon on the Hill, the Sermon on the Mount. In the Sermon on the Mount, he called over and over again to suke. And when we read Paul called for us to suke. He means for us to think. To think. In the early Christians, the whole point, we have a cultural change. The idea that you can think yourself out of sin, for example, right? In the Greek worldview and even the Hebrew worldview, what were you? You were what? Fated. I'm fated. I'm fated. My passions, my whatever. I'm fated to be where I am. In the worldview that Christ and Paul and the authors of Hebrews is talking about, you aren't fated. It is through suke. And so therefore, no matter how bad it is, if you can suke, if you can think, what can you do? I can change it. I can at least formulate a plan, right? So if I'm impoverished, I'm a poor fisherman, right? And I'm a poor fisherman, but I'm fated to be a fisherman. No. If I think, then maybe I can improve my working, the way I work, improve my nets, work harder, right? Bring my sons in, bring my, cousins in, buy more boats, make more money, sell at a better market. You see what I'm saying? Thinking allows you to change where you are. And the message, though, isn't just thinking. There is actually a change in the universe. And that change in the universe, that's what we're getting at right here. So with this incredible message of hope, which is why we have to deal with Melchizedek, right? Let's look at 26. Because I think this brings us right back into the thing. In the NIV, such a high priest meets our need. One who is holy, blameless, pure, set apart from sinners, exalted above the heavens. Let's see what it says in the Greek. Okay, it starts out, we get our 4, right? In the King James it says 4, but the 4 is gar. I've told you before, over and over again, it's a Greek argument. It's the beginning of a Greek argument. Assigning a reason. Toitos, truly this, not such, truly this. The high priest, became prepo, prepo, to tower up us, him and to us, who is, Hosis, I don't know why who is marked, I think it's an ad. Holy, Hosis, right intrinsically, harmless, akos, not worthless, undefiled, the word is amitos, not tainted, separate, chorozo, separate is chorozo, to place room between. Remember that was a word, a chasm? From, apo, off sinners, off harmatolos. Harmatolos. Harmatolos, those who miss the mark, those who miss the telos. And made, literally, genomai, caused to be, hopselos, lofty, then is added, heavens. Here's a translation. Assigning a reason, truly this high priest towered up, literally became conspicuous to us, who is right intrinsically. not worthless, not tainted, place room between off those who miss the mark, and cause to be lofty the sky. Okay, we can pull it, we can take this apart. Assigning a reason truly, the high priest that's going to allow us to hit the mark, right? High priest, he towered up, literally became conspicuous to us. And this is the reason. He was right intrinsically. He was not worthless in the Greek, not worthless, not tainted. Placed room between off those who missed the mark. Look at this a little bit, okay? It's not saying that he was separated from sinners. It's saying it placed room between off those who missed the mark. In other words, he was separated out because of his perfection, right? And we know that the ultimate was he became the sacrifice and was the high priest. That's the point, right? And caused to be lofty the sky. In other words, the reason that Jesus can be the high priest or can do this for us is because he is right intrinsically, not worthless, not tainted. He placed room between those who missed the mark and he was caused to be lofty to the sky. In other words, he created what? Lofty to the sky? Caused to be lofty to the sky?
Higher than creation.
Higher than creation. Greater than creation. Yeah. I go back to that picture. I mean, this is the Greek worldview of the world, of creation in a nutshell. The philosophia, the created part of the universe that we can understand or know. And here's the cosmos, is all this. And then above it is theos. In other words, Jesus, again, he's above the creation, he is God. Yeah. I think our authors, I've read a lot of people, Dan Brown is kind of the great example. Dan Brown is I think, super ignorant kind of guy that I think makes a lot of money by selling books that intentionally draw people away from truth. But you've probably heard it, right? A lot of people say, well, the Bible, the New Testament, does not say directly that Jesus is God. But yet we see in the Greek, does it?
Yes.
It says multiple times that Jesus directly says Jesus is God. Now here's an example where it does not say directly that Jesus is God. Why do you think to the authors of Hebrews it was important to have, like we know at the beginning of Hebrews, he says specifically Jesus is God, right? Without a doubt. But now he's using more ambivalent terms. Why would he do that? What would be the purpose of that?
Jesus trying to prove that he's a high priest also.
Yeah, he's not only is he trying to prove he's a high priest, they're creating what's called a Greek argument, right? A logos to telos. And so in a logos to telos, what do I not do? I don't state, well, I wouldn't say the obvious, but that's good. I don't state the telos, right? I don't tell you what the conclusion is because I want you to draw the conclusion. This is true of all Greek literature. So when I see really good Greek literature, if I'm writing a really good Greek argument, I'm not going to tell you the telos, right? As a matter of fact, look at it this way. You asked, what is the telos for all people? Is all people have the same telos? Great question. I think a beautiful question. I wish that we could get into that. We're not talking about theology here, right? We're talking about what does the Greek say. But I think as we look into the Greek, here's something to think about, okay? So my attempt to hit the mark, right, a logos to telos, the Greek reader is always trying to figure out what is the telos. He's always trying to figure out what is the mark, right? So the mark that you're aiming for, do you know what it is in Greek worldview? When I say that we have to hit the mark, in a Greek worldview, do we know what the mark is? No, you don't. All you can do is aim at it. So let's say, okay, I aim my life, right, at being a good, however you want to say it, a good person, righteous, dikasune, balanced. I aim for wealth, right? I want wealth. I aim for a family. I aim for love. I aim for friendship. I aim for all these things. Will I hit the mark? If I don't hit the mark, I'm aiming for these marks, right? But are the marks known to me? In other words, do I know which ones I'm going to hit and which ones I'm not? Not at all. I mean, you can live your whole life seeking wealth and never achieve it. You could live your whole life trying to seek a goal. But what do you think, what does Jesus then allow you to do? Meet your mark. Right? Your mark. Yes, sir.
I was just gonna say, when many people pray for guidance, what is, Jesus, what is your plan for me? We don't know. We go through life hoping that we're operating towards God's plan for us, and we're achieving that.
But we can consume a lot of our energy seeking a mark that is not ours.
Yes. And that's where I would argue, and that is beautiful, because I would argue one of the biggest problems with people today is guess where they don't set their bar, right? If you're a college student and you're in the hookup culture, where's your bar? It ain't even measurable, right? The perversion in our society, the perversion that we have, there are people who barely can read and write graduating from college, for goodness sakes. There are people that can't read and write graduating from our school system. Where's the bar? The Torah, basically, the implication in the Torah, right, isn't necessarily to read and write, but to gain knowledge, right? But if you aren't even gaining knowledge, you haven't even hit the bar. You haven't even reached the level of suke. Kids.
Yeah,
What?
learn how to think.
Yeah, you got to learn how to think. See, this goes so deep. It's so deep. When you teach children to begin with, what do you teach them? Memorization, right? Memorize poems and prayers and read and memorize the times tables and memorize the tables. And eventually, after 12 years, they might be able to. But if you're a sixth grader and I'm giving you so many choices and I'm saying, well, what do you think about that? What does a 6-year-old think about 1 + 1 = 2? You can't. All you can do is memorize it, right? Memorize the Lord's Prayer, memorize prayers, memorize poems, great literature, right? Read it. You can't create it. 12-year-olds or 12th graders can't create it. You might find one in a bazillion, a kid who can graduate from Harvard, right? Which proves that all the other, if one of the kids that I went to high school with graduated from Harvard, what does that mean I am? Dumber than a dirtbag, right? Because I can't strive to reach that goal. You see what I'm saying?
You can strive to reach
Well, I could strive to reach it, but the chances are probably pretty low. Some people have marks that are 10 talents. Some people have marks that are 5. I think we should all go along the world like we have 10 talent marks, right? And see if we can achieve that. That is the ultimate gospel. As a matter of fact, we're going to get to that. This is really neat stuff. 27. Unlike the other high priests, this is NIV, he does not need to offer sacrifices day after day, first for his own sins and then for the sins of the people. He sacrificed for their sins once and for all when he offered himself. Now remember, this goes back to the previous, this is all Logos to tell us. So the previous thing he said, this is why Jesus can be the high priest that will let you meet the mark. Not just reach the Torah, not just be without sin, but actually achieve the talents, which I think is beautiful. That talent thing is really a cool thing. We kind of ignore that, right? A lot of our times, but I think it's beautiful. This is the 27 from the Greek. Hos, who? Hos needed, literally echo angake, to hold up an arm. To hold up an arm. Who hold up an arm, not daily, not hermia, down day, literally tame, as hosper, just as those high priests, high priest, to offer up anaphero. Literally, anaphero. Remember the pharaoh stuff we had? The anaphero. Remember how you lift up an offering? You lift it up to the marketplace. You lift up an offering to to the altar. This is anaphero. It means to lift up, bear up, lift up a thusa, a sacrifice, the thusa. First, proteron, previously. Proteron, not first, but previously. Over his own idios, literally his own harmantia, missed the mark. And then epitia, thereafter, for the peoples, los. Gar, assigning a reason. So here we go. Greek for, I'm starting an argument. Assigning a reason, toto, that thing he did, literally poio, to make. Once epax, upon one occasion, when he lifted up anaphero, to bear up. Hoto, himself. So there's what it says in the Greek as a translation. Who held up an arm, literally the sacrifice. Not down day, just as the high priest bear up, lift up sacrifice previously over his own missed the mark. Thereafter the peoples, assigning a reason, that thing made upon one occasion, bore up, he lifted himself. And so the translation we have in the NIV is pretty good. In other words, previously the priest had to lift up. Remember, I have the ascension sacrifice. I have the sacrifice for sin or guilt. And then I have the sacrifice for the priest. And then I have the Thanksgiving sacrifice. So I have to, as a high priest, I have to lift up a sacrifice, first an ascension sacrifice, then for my own sin or guilt, right? And then I get the priest sacrifice, which is the sacrifice, which is the oil on top of the meal, and I get the meal as the priest. And then the Thanksgiving sacrifice is for all people. They knew that. Every time you hear these things, every time you hear this, the readers know this. Because remember, they're steeped in the Septuagint, they understand the Torah, and guess what? They see it every day, right? This is after Jerusalem, probably after the destruction of the temple, but what do they have in Alexandria? They have a temple, and every day the priests in the temple are illegally offering the sacrifices. What's really interesting about this too is I want you to notice there is an irony in here. Remember what I told you about sin or guilt sacrifices? There's no sacrifice for intentional sin. So the sin is unintentional. The priest is supposed to give a guilt sacrifice, right? Because he doesn't know which sins he broke unintentionally, right? But the author writes specifically about sin. So what's the irony? The priests are probably not offering a sacrifice for their own sin. There's an irony here. Who doesn't need to offer it? Jesus. That was a previous statement. Let's go to 28. 28, by the way, this is the last verse in 7. It says, "For the law appoints as high priests men who are weak, but the oath which came after the law appointed the Son, who has been made forever, or made perfect forever." So again, this relates back. But let's see what it says. Let's see what it says in the Greek. Gar, assigning a reason, the nomos, the Torah. The Torah maketh, it doesn't maketh, it katastimi, it placed down anthropos, men, as high priests, which is added, to hold infirmity, anasthenia, feebleness, no strength. They have no strength. But the logos of is added. Logos, the oath, horkomose, the asseveration of an oath, literally a limit, restraint of a swear on the name, which is ho, was added, meta, amid the nomos, the Torah, maketh the Son, the is added, maketh huios, offspring, who is added, is added, teleu, Teleum. Teleum. Complete. This is the same as telestai in a different declension. Telestai. For into evermore, literally into the age. Now here's the translation. Assigning a reason, the Torah places down men, high priests, holding feebleness. But the Logos, the assertion on oath to a name, which amid the Torah, the Son completed into the age. Assigning a reason, the Torah places down men, high priests, holding feebleness. But the Logos, the assertion on oath to a name, which amid the Torah, the Son completed into the age. This is really deep stuff. Because Logos, what is the Logos? You got two things, you got multiple things for the Logos. I have the Lego, I have the Logos to telos, right? Which is the argument that he's giving. That is the Logos, right? But we also know the Logos is what?
Jesus.
Jesus. It's the Word, right? The Logos is the Word, which is Jesus, which is the Amar of God. When did the Amar of God swear on the name which was amid the Torah? When was the Amar first spoken? Genesis, to do what?
Creation.
To create the world, right? Create the cosmos, create everything. So the creation of the cosmos was the Amar, was Jesus, was the Logos. So the point here is beautiful. Assign a reason, the Torah places down men, high priests, holding feebleness. But the Logos, Jesus, named the assertion of an oath to a name amid the Torah. In other words, he did what? He not only created the creation, he also created the Torah. He created the Torah. The Son completed into the age. What did he complete into the age? He completed the Torah. Remember, Jesus said, not a jot or a tittle of the Torah will ever go. And he basically said that if you teach children to not follow a single part of the Torah, that you should get the death penalty. Jesus talked about the death penalty. He knew the death penalty in the Torah, and he approved of it. Not only that, he said that if you did not teach people to follow the Torah, that you should be put to death. Teachers should be put to death. Have a millstone put around your neck and dropped into the ocean. That would kill you, right? Just saying.
Good for witches.
Yeah, they don't float. No, witches are supposed to float, right? Anyway, the big deal was that the Torah is the measure. When you say, what is the measure of Mrs. Mark? The author here is telling you that it's obvious. But what did Jesus do for the Torah? He completed it. Not only completed it, the word used is teleu, telestai. You want paid in full, I like better that he hit the mark, right? Jesus hit the mark. And by the way, do we know what the mark is? What is the mark for Jesus? It's kind of funny talking about a mark for Jesus, right? But what is the mark for Jesus? Yeah, to be the sacrifice and to solve the problem of us, our problem. Do you remember when we talked about Mark and the thing that I said? Jesus was not worried in Gethsemane when he was praying. He wasn't worried about him. He'd already figured out what he was going to do. He was going to hit the mark, right? He's like we should be. What was he worried about? That we would mess it up. And you know what? I think that's true today. I think the greatest worry. Now, God is going to achieve his goals, right? But the big deal is, if we don't achieve his goals for him, what happens? It doesn't get done, right? The next generation has to do it, right? If you don't, if you're the Graham, if you're the what's his name, Graham, Billy Graham. If you're the Billy Graham of the age, right? Billy Graham's about is he dead yet? He's pretty close. He's old, right? But if you're the next Billy Graham,
His son.
and you, well, maybe not his son, because Franklin Graham's been doing some stuff, but that's okay. If you don't step up to be the next Billy Graham, right? Who's going to do it? You may be the only person that has that talent. Equally, and I thought, you know, for children, right? Does God call everybody to be pastors and priests and kings or whatever? No. God calls people to be engineers and poets and authors and, you know,
workers.
He calls people to get the garbage from the street. And some people love that as their life thing, you know. Some people are farmers because they want to be. My father was not a farmer because he didn't want to be, but he was forced to be, you know, he did everything to get off the farm. So the thing is that we have marks in our life, right? And our marks are from God, and that's what we as Christians should recognize, right? Does everybody have a mark? Do you know what it is? Pat, what are you saying?
I was just saying, is this chapter saying then, in effect, that Jesus is also the telos, the logos, and the telos, the alpha and the omega?
Well, you just gave it away. Come on. Jesus is the Alpha and the Omega. And yeah, you know, that assertion, by the way, don't ever forget. When I say in Greek, the Alpha and the Omega, I'm talking about the gods. Hestia on the harp is the Alpha and the Omega. And every Greek kid knows this. Yes, sir.
Pastor Myers is always saying, Jesus is always the answer.
I wonder if there's a sort of implication that Jesus allows us to see the true mark, because I was thinking of the prosperity gospel people, and they are totally missing the mark because they have their idea that health and wealth and material things are God's highest for us or whatever. But no, obviously not. You know, the scriptures say, delight yourself in the Lord and he will give you the desires of your heart. So you have to align your heart with God first before you can, you know what your true blessings are. Seek first the kingdom of God, and then, you know, it's like you have to realign your mark.
I think that's good. I'm going to throw out one more thing. I'm sorry, I don't mean to hold you a little bit late, but one thing to think about. It's not just individual, because in the church and in the concept of the Hebrews, who's helping you achieve your mark? The church, the community, your friends, the people, and that's why we have this alignment of the community of the church, is to help us to achieve that mark. Talk about power in that community in that time. This is amazing. We'll talk more about that. Thank you, Father, for your word. We pray you look after us this week. In your name we pray, amen.
Hebrews, this word does say don't give up meeting together. So